Hey, what's up guys, Benzo Figures here, and today I will be showcasing the Marvel United Spider-Geddon minis that I painted. Full disclosure, this is coming from obviously not a professional. Like, I wouldn't even consider myself an amateur painter. I'm more of a, action figure enjoyer. Yeah, let's go with that. So this is my first time ever painting miniatures, let alone Marvel United minis. So this is my perspective on what it's like painting these things for someone that doesn't paint minis at all. That being said, I'll showcase each one in the ranking of difficulty and grade each one and my thoughts on it as well. So let's jump right into it. So at number 10, Spot. Spot was the least difficult to paint. It helps the fact that the design is mostly just white. So just after a couple coats of white primer, I used white paint and German gray instead of black. German gray is pretty dark as it is, and for the rocket I used flat red. The flame effects was pretty easy. I used a orange coat, then dry brush a sunflower yellow, and then dry brush lemon yellow for the top part of the flames. For the ground, I want to say I used leather brown and used a black wash over it after it dried. Overall, this was a good mini to dip your toes in, not literally, and start painting minis off with. This gets a 1 out of 5 in difficulty. Easy work. At number 9 is Spider Noir. For this, I used like 3 colors. I used German gray instead of black, Stonewall gray, and gunmetal. After painting all that, I went over the whole mini with a black wash. I used German gray so that the black wash shows more of the details. After the wash, I went over some of the detailing with Stonewall gray over the goggles and some of the lining on his shirt and button. This figure was slightly tougher than Spot to paint, only because the back was slightly annoying to paint without touching the walls and stuff. Still not difficult at all. This also gets a 1 out of 5. Easy work again. So at number 8, it is Anti-Venom. So I coated this with a white primer, and this also doesn't use a lot of paint. After a couple of coats of white primer, just like Spot, that does 90% of the work for you, and the rest is like detailing. I painted white over the primer and used German gray for the pattern, and for the inside of the mouth, I used flat red. For the eyes, I used lemon yellow. So for the spider pattern, wrapping from the ribs to the back was a little annoying to follow, but overall wasn't too bad to paint and follow. The symbiote that is dripping on the floor was a bit tough to follow at first, but once you put the floor-based paint coat down, you can just freestyle where the symbiote pattern goes on the floor. So that makes it slightly tougher than the previous two, but still, easy work. 1 out of 5 difficulty again. Or more like 1.1 out of 5? But you know what, let's just keep it at 1 out of 5. At number 7, Symbiote Spider-Man. I coated the mini with black primer and used German gray again. What a surprise. Yeah, so I used German gray for the symbiote suit, and I also used white paint for the huge web and web pattern. For the base, I used, I want to say flat brown or leather brown with a black wash. Getting the paint in between the web pattern on the floor was pretty tough. In hindsight, I could have painted the floor first to make it easier and then just dry brush white on top of it. But I didn't do that and made it tougher for myself. So regardless, this too was also easy work. 1.5 out of 5 difficulty level. At number 6, it is Scarlet Spider. The first figure that actually uses more than 3 colors. Maybe 4, but in seriousness, I think I used like 6 or 7. So like the other figures, I used black primer to coat it first, and then I used a flat red for the suit and a flat blue for the hoodie. I think I actually used black paint for the symbol this time around. I used gunmetal for the wrist bracelets and the belt piece. And for the base, I used mahogany brown on the floor, stonewall gray for the thingy that he's sticking on, and I'm blanking on what color green I use, and I will insert it in post. Anywho, this one didn't really give me too many issues, to be honest. I used a dry brushing technique for the white hoodie laces and used little paint and brushed perpendicularly to not get paint on the rest of the figure. Not too bad, it was easy work. Also a 1.5 out of 5. Halfway through the list, at number 5, Penny Parker. So not gonna lie, I was pretty intimidated by this mini, and this was the very last one I painted because of the size and complexity of this mini. But as I was painting it, it surprisingly wasn't too bad at all. I painted Penny at first, then the mech afterward, and I treated it as painting 2 separate minis. For Penny, I used a basic skin tone, mahogany for the eyes, German gray for the shirt, and flat green for the skirt. The eyes were tough to paint though. Every time I used too much paint for the eyes, I cleaned it up with some more skin tone paint. But yeah, painting eyes is definitely the hardest part of painting this. Other than that, for the spider mech, I use scarlet red, gunmetal, black, sunflower yellow, and lemon yellow. For the eyes, chest piece, and other glowing areas, I first use the sunflower yellow as a coat first, and then use lemon yellow in the center of it to give it a more glow color to it. My advice on tackling on this mini is to do one character at a time and take your time with it. This really wasn't too bad at all, so I will give this mini 1 point for Penny and 1 point for Spider Mech. 2 out of 5. Not too bad. I'll probably need to come up with a better ranking title, but not too bad for now. Hey. But hey, let me know in the comments what my 1 through 5 ranking title should be called. At number 4, we got Morbius. No wait, it's Morlun. No time for Morbid time. So the official Marvel United artwork on him has him with a purple jacket, but the character himself has a black jacket with some blues and grays for the vest. I went with the card's color instead, so that way when I do play this, I'll look like the thing. So the concept rendering has the flame effects lighting bouncing off the figure itself, and yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm just not on that level, like what the... So I mix a little bit of bone white and stone gray for the skin tone, some sort of purple paint, sorry I forget the specific name, I'll write it in post, and black for the hair, flat red for his eyes and gems. So painting him wasn't too bad. The flame effects looks pretty intimidating, especially for a first timer, but just like those flame effects for Spot, just coat it first and dry brush it in layers. I think this time around, I followed the concept art and used lighter colors as the base and going towards the top using darker colors. So lemon yellow to sunflower yellow to orange. Dry brushing makes the flame effect look more in depth, and overall, not too bad. 2.5 out of 5. Down to the final 3, and hey, thanks for sticking around this far in. At number 3, Spider-Punk. So for Spider-Punk, I use scarlet red, and I want to say I use flat blue for the vest and pants. I also use white for the shoes and eyes, and silver for the spikes. So this one was a bit tougher, not gonna lie. The guitar obstructs part of the figure, and painting that part of the pants was a pain. Also for the web lines, I don't have the most steady hands, and a lot of the time I would either use too little paint or too much paint on the lines. So I would have to go back and fix up the lines, but I would also color outside the lines and mess up that way too. But no worries though, it's only paint. So after adding weight to the lines, I went back and touched up the suit with scarlet red. It's a bit of a trial and error, definitely a difficulty spike compared to the last several figures, but it's not too bad whenever you mess up. You can always touch up and fix up mistakes by painting over it. This gets a 2.75 out of 5. I don't really want to give it a full point over, but it's really not that bad painting this, especially for a guy like me that's not too experienced at it. At number 2, Silk. Silk was definitely way tougher than I thought it was going to be. So again, I used German Gray, flat red, basic skin tones, mahogany for the eyes, and white. So what was the most difficult part? It was painting the eyes, and painting eyes is always a pain. I use a 0.00000 brush, and even with that, I think it was still way too big. I think I use a toothpick, but toothpicks don't really hold that much paint, so I might have to look into Gundam pens for eyes. And surprisingly, what was also very difficult was painting the web patterns on her back. Those lines are super thin, and I use a dry brushing technique of using little paint and brushing perpendicularly, but since it's a circular pattern, it got paint on the center part of the pattern, and I had to reset and paint over it again. I think eventually I just held the mini close to my eye and just went over the lines carefully. Take your time and go over it again in parts. That should help with painting the lines, and this gets a difficulty ranking of 3 out of 5, mediocre. Last but not least, the most difficult mini to paint in this lineup was Superior Spider-Man. For this, I coated it with a black primer, used vermilion for the suit, used black for the darker parts, and silver for the goggles. So what made this the most difficult part to paint was that it comes with this freaking stage hazard trying to paint over it with these spider legs. I've considered breaking them apart and gluing them back together after I painted the figure, but nah. So the web pattern was a bit difficult. The mini is like crunched over, but still has these web patterns protruding from the design. So I coated it red first, and when trying to paint the patterns on it, it was a pain to figure out what line goes with what color and stuff. Eventually, my variant comedian Viet told me not to fret too much about it, just because the view will be obstructed anyway, so it's not too big of a deal. With that in mind, I give this mini a difficulty ranking of 3.5 out of 5, still mediocre in difficulty. So wrapping up, final thoughts. For a first timer painting miniatures and Marvel United minis, this set was not too bad at all. It has its frustrating moments, but they were too far in between to really say it was difficult to paint. The majority of the set was still really easy to paint, and the rest was slightly less easier to paint. So overall, the final verdict for the entire set gets a difficulty ranking of 2 out of 5. Not too bad. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this video. Let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see more content like this. Drop a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.